So yesterday we kind of had a brief session as to it was kind of an introduction session where we had an understanding as to how CQ works, and the main understanding of CQ is that it provides a platform for content authors so that to build their web pages or website without having to depend more on the developers, right? So that generic platform would be created by AEM developers. So that's the whole idea. So today, what we would be learning is we'll learn something called as a three-tier architecture. So we will learn how CQ is uh, placed. I mean, the infrastructure of CQ. When anyone speaks to you about what is an author, what is a publisher, right? So we will learn this architecture, and we'll also do a local server setup. And apart from this, if time permits, we'll also go through all the some of the consoles, some of the important consoles or screens. Okay, so these are the three topics which we will be covering for today. So this three-tier architecture, what is this three-tier architecture? So from this slide, if you can see here, so this is typically called as the three-tier architecture. When I say three-tier architecture, uh, so basically the it consists of an author CQ server, it consists of a publish CQ server, and then it has something called as a dispatcher. And dispatcher is not a CQ server, it is a web application. It is a web application server. Rather, the author and the publish are CQ servers. And the author server is where all the content is created. So the author, whenever he wants to create a page, let me just pull out uh, the, okay, cool. Sorry about that. Yeah, so in this particular author server, so these are all three separate servers. So all together form a environment. When anyone says a dev environment, it will have an author server, it will have a publish server, and also it will have a dispatcher. So dispatcher is not a CQ server, whereas author and publish are CQ servers. And when the author, like yesterday we discussed that author is given a platform where he can create pages on that platform, and he can drag and drop content like image, text component. So this platform and these components are developed by CQ developer or AEM developers, right? So the author can use this platform to create a page, and also he can change or modify this particular page according to the changes. Like your website might change every day, right? So he can basically change the content within the page as and when required without having to depend on the developer. So this particular platform is a generic platform where he can drag and drop the content, right? So let's say, so this author server is a CQ server. So from now onwards, I'll not refer to the server as the author, the CQ5 server as a server. Rather, I would refer it to as the author instance. So if it, I mean, whenever I say instance, it means a server, right? Whenever the author instance is up, the content creator or author would be able to create pages. So the content is created here, and he would drag and drop an image within the page. He would add some text into the page. And once this content is ready, so where is the edit done? The edit and content creation, content as in the web pages, right? So because CQ5 as a product is mainly used for building websites, and you should be able to build a website in such a way that the content creators or authors can manage the website by themselves and not having to have a tightly coupled relationship with the developers and or going back to the developers for changes, right? So they can do it by their self. So here, if you see, once the author creates a page and he drags and drops a image component and he adds some text into the page, and he feels that this page is ready, and once the page is ready, he will activate the page or he will publish the page. So he will activate the page or publish the page, and this page goes and sits in publish server. And publish instance or server is basically a CQ server. Again, it is not different, or it is not any other server, but it is a separate server which is a CQ instance, where the job of this particular server is only to expose the content. When I say expose the content, once the content is present in publish, it is available for public, that is the end user. So the end user can access this particular page, right? So the job of publish instance is only to expose the content, and it will have pages which are only ready to be served to the end user or public. And there cannot be, you cannot do any edits, or the author is not supposed to do any edits directly on the publish server. He should be doing the edits only on the author server, and once the content is ready, there would be a button called as activate or publish. So he can just click on that button and the page would be live. And once it is live, it, I mean, the author cannot edit that content on the publish instance, but he can edit that content on the author, and then again he can publish it, making changes or modifications to the page. But once he activates, the content is live, and the job of publish instance is only to expose the content to the end user. And the end user, let's say this page is some HTML, right? So whenever a request is made from the browser, this page would be accessed. The end user cannot directly access the publish page. He cannot directly access the publish page. Rather, he will have to go through a layer called as dispatcher. So dispatcher is a web application server, and I mean, Apache web server. It is a Apache web server, and dispatcher is a module provided by Adobe. So you need to install this particular module into the Apache web server. And once that module is installed, it acts as a security layer. So the end user will have to go through the dispatcher, access the page, and then the request is served. Okay. And so the main so basically the main job of dispatcher is that it acts as a security layer. It'll only allow the web pages to be accessed by the end user. It will not allow any other consoles or screens which are there in publish, like product screens or so some configurations and things like that. So those configurations and those consoles which are used by administrators should not be available to the end user. So it completely blocks them from using those other content, and also it acts as a security layer. And apart from that, it also acts as a caching system. When I say caching, let's say if this is a.html, so I as an end user request a.html, the request goes through the dispatcher, and if a.html is present here, it will fetch that, and the response, while sending back the response, it would be cached or stored here in the dispatcher. So next time, whenever I request for a.html, the request wouldn't go to the publish server at all. So it is since the content is already cached or stored here in the dispatcher, it would directly serve from the dispatcher itself. So that is the caching mechanism. So just to give you a brief, so author instance is a CQ server where all the content is created here, and the author plays around with the pages, he edits the pages, and then once the page is ready, he will activate the page. And once the page is activated or published, it is live for public, where the end user can access those pages through a security layer called as dispatcher. So dispatcher is a module provided by Adobe where you need to install that particular module onto the Apache web server. And publish instance is also a CQ server, whereas the only difference between the author and publish is that all the content can be edited in author, whereas in publish it is not supposed to be edited, whereas the purpose of publish instance is only to expose the content to the end user. Okay, so this is the flow. So any doubts or any questions? Okay, so yeah, you might have a question that how the connection would be made from author to publish, right? How this particular connection would be made. So all of that, I would be covering it in a separate class where it's just a simple configuration. You just have to give the details in the configuration, and that would make a link between the author and publish. So those configurations are called as replication agents. So in the later classes, I would also be showing you like what is a replication agent and how you can create a replication agent and how do you connect the author with the publish server. Okay, so another scenario would be like, let me just erase this time. So the author has created a page. He has dragged and dropped some components, that is image component, text component, image component, or basically he has created a web page, and whatever layout of the page he wants and whatever images or text he wants, he has created that. And once it is ready, he would publish it to the publish server. So now the page is ready and available in the publish server. So when the same page is requested by the end user, so first time it goes through the dispatcher, the request. So basically this is the request, and then fetches the page, and the response would be stored here, that is caching, and then it would be served to the end user. So now second time when the same page is requested, it would not hit the publish instance, rather it would fetch it from the dispatcher itself. So now you might have a question that what if the content is being updated, right? So the author adds some more text here, he edits the page and he adds some more text, and then he publishes or activates the page. Once he activates a page, now there is new content here. But when a request is made, the cache is stored here, right? The old content cache is stored here. And even though the page is updated, since the page is available here, it would kind of display the old page itself and not the updated page. So for that, CQ has another mechanism where the author directly has a connection with the dispatcher. And this connection is made through like how author and publish are connected using replication agents. The connection between author and dispatcher are through something called as flush agents. So this is also a configuration where you just have to provide the details of a dispatcher, and the author and dispatcher would be connected through the flush agent. So whenever the page edit happens, and once the page is ready, the author would publish or activate the page, right? So on the activation of a page, the flush agent would flush that particular page. It would flush that particular page from the dispatcher. And since the page would be flushed, and also the new content is pushed here to publish instance, next time whenever the page is requested, since the cache would be deleted by the flush agent, the request would again go through the publish instance, and it would fetch the updated content, and then again it will store the new updated content, or it will cache the new updated content, and then it would respond to the end user. So this is how caching and cache invalidation. So always remember that whenever you have a caching system, you also need to handle the invalidation of that particular cache. So always, so you should not be producing stale content to the end user. So you need to update the cache accordingly. Okay, so this is how the invalidation of cache is handled. So any doubts or any questions till now?
Hey, I was small out like, uh, uh,
Mhm.
yeah, what is reverse replication? Like how reverse replication happens?
Yeah. So coming to your point, reverse replication is something like replication we know, right? Once the content is ready, it would be pushed to publish instance. So the same way, whenever you have systems like forums or where there are a lot of user generated content, it is called as UGC. So at times like that, so let's say you have a forums website on the CQ5 server, right? So there are a lot of blogs, user comments, and everything posted. So all those are user generated content. So the user generated content, so let's say this is a page, this is a blog page. It is published to publish server. And in this blog, the end user enters some comments. So that comment would be stored in publish instance, but also it needs to be stored in the author page as well. So that is basically called as reverse replication. And from 6.2 onwards, there is no reverse replication. So it is kind of a deprecated feature. So now what happens is, for all the user generated content, we have a separate repository. So only, so this repository, we call it as the MongoDB. So it is again a different NoSQL database. So all the user generated content, only not the web pages, the web pages would still be stored in our JCR repository, Java content repository. So from yesterday's class, we learned that the three technology stacks, right? Sling, JCR, and OSGi. So JCR is our repository. It is a local repository used by CQ5 server. So the publish server will also have a repository. Author will also have a repository. The pages would still be stored in the repository, whereas the user generated content would be stored in the MongoDB server. And since it is a common repository, reverse replication is not required for UGC. So you can both publish. So once the comment is made, since it will be stored in a common repository, and author would also be pointed to this particular repository. So automatically it solves the reverse replication problem. So I mean, now it is kind of a deprecated feature, so you don't have reverse replication in 6.2 onwards. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, cool. So yeah, so this is I mean, this is a very important concept where if you're working on a CQ project, you will be hearing a lot of people calling out author, publisher, dispatcher. So now that you know what is an author, what is a publisher and a dispatcher, so you have a basic idea. And generally, the dev server. So in a typical web application, if you have an environment, like you generally have dev, QA, stage, and production, right? So these are the common environments which you have in for any project. So when anybody refers to dev, they will have a author, publish, and a dispatcher. If anybody refers to QA, even there they will have a author, publish, and a dispatcher. Same goes with stage, but in production, it might slightly change depending upon the number of users accessing your website. Like there are 1 million users. So generally, these three are internal: development, QA, and stage are kind of used by developers within the project, QAs within the project, or project managers within the project. But production is used by the public, right? So obviously more number of requests would come in. Like say your website should handle a 1 million user. Like you know that according to some previous data, you know that your website, generally people visit your website, the number of people visiting your website is 1 million. So you need to kind of increase the publish instances, because publish instance takes the load of the end users and it is used to expose the content. So you can have any number of publish instances depending upon the number of users accessing your website. And same way, I mean, author, you can always have a single author, and this author instance would be connected to all three publish instance. And when the page is activated, or when the page is ready by the author and activated, it goes into all three publish instance. So always the content, the web pages should be in sync with all the three publish instances. And now comes the picture of load balancing. So the other feature of dispatcher is you can also use it as a load balancer, where whenever the request comes, the load would be balanced amongst these three server. But generally, in real-time projects, they don't use dispatcher as a load balancer. They only use it for caching and security. They would have a 1:1 dispatcher. When I say 1:1, they would again have three dispatchers, and this dispatcher would be connected to publish one, this dispatcher to publish two, and then this dispatcher to publish three. And here they would have an actual enterprise load balancer, which would take the load and distribute it amongst the dispatchers, right? So that, so typically this would be your production infrastructure. So it would have one author. Depending upon the number of users using your website, so ideally across all the projects which I've worked, it would have around 3 published users. But if there are like 10 million users, 20 million users who are accessing your website, then it would go, I've seen projects where they've used 10 published instances as well. So it actually depends on the number of users accessing your website. So it makes sense, right? So since all the content is exposed in the publish and the publish is responsible for taking the load, so it's better rather than having it in a one published server, you can split the load amongst all the different servers. So this is the architecture which kind of speeds up the user experience and response, the performance of the website. So basically the response time is pretty fast in this particular architecture. So this is called as the 3-tier architecture. Okay, so let me just erase this drawing. Yeah. So now going back to how to install a CQ server in your local system. So to install a CQ server in your local system, the first step is you need to have JDK 1.8. So make sure you install and download and install JDK 1.8. So if you're not sure how to install JDK 1.8, in the class notes, in the today's class notes, I'll be sending you some links where it specifies steps how to install JDK 1.8, or you can Google it out how to install JDK 1.8. JDK is nothing but Java development kit. So since CQ is built on Java, for the server to work in your laptop, you need JDK 1.8. And along with JDK 1.8, you need a jar file. So this is the server. So the server has a jar file, and along with the jar file, it has a license file. Okay, so you need the license file. So this is a training license. So I would be providing the jar file and the license file. So you will require these two files. So first install JDK, and then you need the jar file and the license file to install the AEM server. So I have that particular, those two files already in my machine. So let me just open up this. Yep. So this is the jar file, and then this is the license.properties file. So it's very simple. Installing CQ server is very simple from a developer's perspective, where you just have to double click on the jar file. So once you double click on the jar file, you would get this particular pop-up or dialog where it shows the progress of the installation. Okay, so it'll take about 5 minutes for the first time, and if you see, a new folder has been created here, right? So this particular folder is created once you install the CQ server. So for the first time, this folder would be created. Second time onwards, it will use the existing folder itself. So it will not recreate the folder each and every time. So meanwhile, while this particular installation is happening, another important thing or important point to note is that the jar file name. So if you see here, the jar file name, let me just copy this jar file name. So the naming convention of the jar file is very important. So usually it is split into three parts. The first part is the application name. And separated by hyphen. The second part is the mode, the server mode. And the third part is the port in which you want to install the CQ server. And the last one is the extension, so you can ignore the extension. So if you see here in the above file name, so you can give any application name. You can give your project name or AEM or whatever name you want. And the second one is whether you want to start the server in publish mode or author mode. So now, since we know the three-tier architecture, we understand what is an author or a publish, right? So for a developer, mostly you don't have to have a publish instance installed in your local. So for a developer, it's okay to just have the author server up and running so that you can deploy your code, and whenever you want to see how it looks in publish server, there are ways you can look at a page in preview mode, and that would pretty much show how it looks to the end user. So you don't have to install both author and publish in your local. So it's okay to just install author server in your machine. So that is the server mode. The third one is the port. So usually the port, all CQ servers generally they keep it as 4502. So you can give any port number. So you can give the port number here. So the naming convention is important. And if you observe here, so this is the naming convention. CQ-author-port number. And if you see here, it is starting in a particular port, and that port is 4502. Okay, so yeah, another thing is that there are alternative ways where you can start the CQ server. One is the easiest way, that is just double clicking, that is the graphical user interface. And the other way is through command line. So you can basically start a CQ server in command line. So generally in command line, whenever you want to execute a jar file, what do? You just say jar, and then this is the jar file name, right? So you just give the jar file name. And if you hit enter, so if this jar file is there, it would actually execute the jar file. And once you execute the jar file, so basically whatever is happening in the front end, that would happen in the command line as well. So let me just pull up. Yeah, so from the student PDF, right? So the exercise which we are doing today is install and start an author instance. So that is there on page number 2-3. So that is second chapter, page number 3. So if I go to 2-3, this is the exercise. So here, the first way is very simple, just double click. Second way wouldn't require, I mean, you as a developer, you wouldn't have to do that. So it's just for your knowledge purpose. So you can always go with the easiest one. So if you see here, this is the command to start the CQ server using your terminal. So this is basically the terminal. So yeah. So basically you can use this command like java -jar and then the jar file name. And to this command you can add few other, let me just copy the command from here. So generally, so this is the command. So java -jar and then the jar file name. And then you can give certain parameters. So you can allocate certain memory only for your CQ server. So let's say, so this memory is called as XMS. Basically, it's the maximum heap size. And if you've worked on Java application, since Java is an object-oriented programming language, all the objects will be stored in a memory called as heap memory. And that heap memory is a part of your RAM. So if you have a 4 GB RAM and you can allocate 1 GB of memory, you can set aside 1 GB of memory only for your CQ server. So you have that option as well. Okay. So this particular command can be used. So if you want, you can set aside some space only for your CQ server, or it is good enough if you use java-jar to start the server. So it's as simple as that. So install JDK, and then if you have the jar file and then the license, just double click on the jar file, it would install. Or if you are a command line person, you can open up your terminal or command prompt and then go to the location where you have your jar file. So always, I mean, make sure that you put the jar file and the license file in a separate folder so that it's easy for you to go into the new folder created. So the moment you install the CQ server, there would be a folder created, that is the CRX quick start folder. So this particular folder has all the artifacts for your server to run, all the required necessary files for your server to run. And you don't have to necessarily know all these folders, but there are some important folders here. One is a bin folder. So the bin folder has scripts in it. So basically, the start script, the stop script, all of these shell scripts and the batch files. So if you're using Windows, you can use bat, or if you're using Mac or Linux, you can go with the shell script. So basically, if you want to customize the scripts, the start and stop scripts, that is part of the administrator's job, where he can customize these scripts according to the server. So basically, these are all start and stop scripts available. So start and stop scripts for the server. And the other important folder here within the CRX Quickstart folder is the logs. So you have n number of logs here, like access log, audit log. So there are different kinds of logs, but the very important log or the master log is the error.log. So within the error.log, so why are logs used? If at all you have a problem in your server, you'll have to go and debug the logs and look at what the error is. So then you will be able to figure out why your server went down. That is the reason you have the logs. And the error log is the main log where you'll have to look if there is any problem. Okay, so this is the CRX quick start folder. When it will be created automatically by the jar file. Okay, and if you see here, our server is up and running. And if you want to shut down the server, you just click on this particular button here. So it will shut down the server. So there is no restart. So if at all you want to do a restart, you need to shut down the server and then again double click on the jar file, which would bring up your server. So once your server is installed and it is ready, so this is the screen which shows or comes up. And here you can, so basically this screen, if you see the URL of the screen, it is localhost 4502. So even if the screen doesn't come up to you, you can just type localhost colon 4502. So why localhost? Because it is your local laptop or local machine. And then which port the server was installed in? 4502. Hit enter. It will automatically take you to the sign in screen. So here by default you can use admin as username, and password is also admin. So you can use admin. So once you log in, so for the first time it will take some time to show up the welcome screen. Yeah. So this is basically your welcome screen. So this is called as the, so this is the latest welcome screen. But and also this latest welcome screen is called as the modern UI or touch UI screen. So for developers, it's always good that you get familiarized with the classic screen, the old screen, and then move on. I mean, if required, you can move on to the new touch UI screen. But mostly the screen would be used by the authors. And for developers, it is always good that you get familiarized with the classic UI screen or the old classic screen. That is the welcome screen, right? So how do you go to the classic UI screen? So here, after localhost 4502, just type welcome/welcome. It will take you to the classic UI welcome screen. So this particular screen is very important for you to navigate around the AEM tool. So I'll go through some of the consoles here. I mean, there are a lot of consoles here, but I would go through some of the consoles which you will be using on a day-to-day life, like on a day-to-day activities, you would be using these consoles a lot. So the first console or the first screen is the website console. Let me open it in another tab. So you can go to the welcome screen and then you can go to that particular console, or another way is to remember the URL. If you just type slash site admin, it will take you to the website screen. And this website screen is where all your web pages would be managed. So like I said, you can have multiple uh, uh, websites as well. So if you see here, these websites are given, I mean, these websites come out of the box. That is the Geometrics Outdoor website, Geometrics Demo site, Geometrics Media, Geometrics Government. So these are all websites which come out of the box and we can use it as a reference. So here is where the author would create pages. So he can create a new page. He can activate. I was telling about the activate, right? So he can activate the page, and there is also deactivate. What if the content goes live by mistake? You want to recall that particular page. So you can click on deactivate, which will recall the page. So this console is where the author creates a page and then he can double click on any of these pages. So just to show you guys, if I double click on the English page, it would open up another page. This is basically the page editor. So I'll speak about the page editor screen tomorrow in detail. Like we'll go through uh, like what are all the features available within the editor, right? So the author can basically change this particular image. He can change the text here and things like that. He can drag and drop a new component here. So that particular aspect, we'll look at that in tomorrow's class. So, but just for your understanding, what is a website console used for? It is used to manage all the websites, and obviously websites meaning web pages. And the second console is the digital asset console, or it is popularly called as the digital asset manager, the DAM. So if you see, the short URL is DAM admin. Like how we have site admin, you have DAM admin. So digital asset manager. So here you can upload all of the images. So you can basically say if your site is some site like geometrics media, so you can basically organize your digital assets. Digital asset can be anything, right? It can be an image, video, a document, a simple text file. So all of that can be organized. You can upload a new image, you can create a new folder, and you can copy, paste, move, activate, deactivate, all of those standard activities you'll be able to do. Like how you manage a web page in Site Admin, you manage all the digital assets in the digital asset manager. So the other important console, very important console, is the CRX-DE Lite console. So CRX, so if you, or you can just enter /CRX/DE. It will take you to the CRX-DE Lite console. So this is a very important console. If you just type CRX/DE, it will again take you to the, so this is, I mean, you can just remember why I'm stressing on the URL is that generally everybody needs to be aware of the URL, or if you don't want to remember anything, you can directly go to the website console, and from there you can go to any of the consoles from the welcome screen. Okay, so CRX-DE Lite is it basically has two purposes. The importance of this particular console is that so okay, first the full form of CRX-DE Lite. So CRX, we know, content repository extreme, and then DE is development environment. So light meaning it is a browser-based editor. So this particular console is the browser-based editor, and all your code, everything would be stored in the repository, and it is a user interface to explore the repository. So yesterday I was speaking about this particular slide, right? So CQ5 is built on Apache Sling. Our repository is Java Content Repository and OSGi. So from a visualization perspective, how do you look at the data which is present in the repository? So that visualization, that UI is provided by using that UI is provided by this particular console. And here if you see, I said that there are nodes. So the JCR is all, it has all nodes, and each node has child nodes. Like if I go to content, it has some child node. And when I click on any of the node, it has properties. And those properties are name value pairs. So those are key value pairs if you see here. So there can be system properties and there can be user properties as well. So if you see here, the JCR, the JCR created by, who created it? I mean, created by JCR created, when was it created? And each and every node has something called as JCR primary type. So each node needs to have some significance. So the primary type of this particular node is it's a page. Hence the primary type of this particular node is a CQ page. It's like a variable. So you can have string variables, you can have array, you can have an integer, you can have a long, like that. Each and every node needs to have a specific purpose, and that purpose is specified through a property called as JCR primary type. And if you see, this is a, I mean, it says it's a Sling folder. Basically, it's a folder. Okay. So each and every node has properties, and properties are nothing but key value pairs. I'll explain in one of the class as to where our code is stored, where what are all the purpose of these particular nodes. Okay. So this is one, the first purpose of CRXT Lite is that it acts as a UI for the repository to see what is there in the content, I mean in the repository. So you can explore and see what is actually, so this is basically our repository. So you can explore and see what all is stored in our database or repository. And the second purpose is it is used a lot by CQ developers to create components, templates. So basically even Java code as well sometimes. So if I go to apps, geometrics, and if I open one of the component, so these are all JSPs if you see, Java server pages. So when I open up, I can basically edit the code here, and then I can save the code. It would automatically reflect in the web page. Okay. So it can be used as a editor, a development tool for the developer. So most of the development, 50% of the development would be done on the CRXT Lite. Another 50% of the development would be done using Eclipse or any other IDE. Okay, so this is the importance of CRXT Lite. And similarly, we have a lot of other consoles like workflows, uh, tools, users, inbox. So these are some of the other consoles which I would be explaining as and when we go through certain concepts like workflow concept. When I teach the concept of workflow, I would kind of go through that console and I would show you what is the significance of each and every console. For now, website, digital asset, and then the CRXT Lite. So these are the three important consoles which you need to know to get started. Okay. So any doubts or any questions till now? Okay. Cool. So if at all there are no questions, we'll conclude the class and we'll meet again tomorrow at 7 p.m. PST. So every day it will be 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So make sure you join on time so that you don't miss a lot of things. But even if you miss certain things, the recording would be provided. So you can go through the recording. Okay. So thanks guys. Thanks for joining. See you tomorrow.